Marcus Blackwood had ruled over the vampire clans of the Northern Territories for over 800 years. His castle stood on the highest peak of Mount Ravencrest, its dark towers piercing the cloudy sky like ancient spears. Tonight, the sky was angrier than usual. Hail the size of golf balls crashed down from the black clouds, and lightning split the darkness every few seconds. Marcus stood at his study window, watching the storm rage across the valley below. His pale fingers drummed against the stone windowsill. Something felt different about this storm. In all his centuries of existence, he had learned to trust his instincts. They had kept him alive when other vampires had fallen to hunters, rival clans, or their own foolish mistakes. The wind howled like a wounded beast, and the hail grew larger. Marcus could see trees bending almost to the ground, their branches snapping under the weight of ice. The small human village at the bottom of the mountain would be suffering tonight. He usually paid little attention to human affairs, but tonight something pulled at his consciousness. A sound reached his superhuman hearing. It was faint, almost lost in the roar of the storm, but it was definitely there. A child's cry. Marcus frowned. No child should be outside in weather like this. Even the hardiest adults would struggle to survive such a violent hailstorm. Marcus moved to his balcony, his long black coat billowing in the fierce wind. His dark hair whipped around his face as he scanned the mountainside with his enhanced vision. There, about halfway down the rocky slope, he spotted a small figure huddled behind a boulder. The child was trapped in the open, with hailstones pounding down relentlessly. For a moment, Marcus hesitated. He had made it a rule never to involve himself directly in human affairs. It was safer that way, and it had served him well for centuries. But something about this situation felt important, though he couldn't explain why. Another flash of lightning illuminated the scene more clearly. It was a little girl, probably no more than 7 years old. Her small body was pressed against the rock, trying to shield herself from the ice falling from the sky. She wore a thin pink jacket that offered little protection against the storm's fury. Marcus made his decision. In one fluid motion, he leaped from his balcony and began descending the mountainside. His vampire speed allowed him to move like shadow, dodging the falling hail with ease. Within seconds, he had covered the distance that would have taken a human 20 minutes to climb. The little girl looked up as he approached, her wide brown eyes reflecting fear and confusion. She had shoulder-length blonde hair that was now soaked and tangled. Her clothes were already torn from scrambling over the rocks, and small cuts on her arms showed where sharp stones had scraped her skin. "Stay calm," Marcus said, his voice carrying easily over the storm. He knelt beside the boulder, using his body to shield her from the worst of the hail. "I'm here to help you." The girl stared at him for a long moment. Marcus expected her to scream or run away. Most humans, especially children, instinctively feared vampires, even when they didn't understand what they were seeing. But this little girl did something unexpected. She smiled. "You came," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind. "Mom told me stories about you." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach, and it had nothing to do with the storm. "What did you say?" But before the girl could answer, a particularly large hailstone cracked against the boulder above them, sending smaller pieces of ice and rock tumbling down. Marcus quickly wrapped his arms around the child, pulling her close to his chest. "We need to get you somewhere safe," he said. "Can you hold on tight?" The girl nodded and wrapped her small arms around his neck. Marcus stood, cradling her against him, and began the journey back up the mountain. His supernatural speed made the climb effortless, even while carrying the child and dodging the continuing hailfall. As they moved, the girl spoke again, her lips close to his ear. "My name is Emma Richardson. My mom's name was Sarah Richardson. She told me stories about a vampire king who lived in the castle on the mountain. She said he was different from the scary vampires in movies." Marcus nearly stumbled, something that should have been impossible for a creature of his abilities. Sarah Richardson. That name hit him like a physical blow, bringing back memories he had buried decades ago. 30 years earlier, when Marcus had been hunting a rogue vampire who was killing humans in the valley, he had encountered a young woman named Sarah. She had been a nurse at the local hospital, working late one night when the rogue vampire attacked. Marcus had arrived just in time to save her life, but she had seen everything. Instead of running or screaming, Sarah had insisted on helping Marcus track down the killer. She had been brave and intelligent, with a quick wit that impressed even an ancient vampire. For 3 weeks, they had worked together to stop the rogue. In that time, Marcus had found himself drawn to her in ways he hadn't experienced in centuries. When they finally cornered and destroyed the rogue vampire, Marcus had made the hardest decision of his long life. He used his mental abilities to erase Sarah's memories of everything supernatural, including their time together. It was safer for her that way. Humans who knew too much about vampire society rarely lived long, happy lives. But, apparently, the memory wipe hadn't been as complete as he thought. Marcus reached his castle and carried Emma through the main entrance. The warmth hit them immediately, and he could feel the girl's shivering begin to subside. He set her down gently in the great hall, where a massive fireplace provided dancing light and heat. "Are you hurt?" Marcus asked, kneeling down to examine her cuts and bruises. Emma shook her head. "Just cold and scared. But you saved me, just like Mom said you would if I ever needed help." "Emma," Marcus said carefully, "tell me exactly what your mother told you about me." The little girl sat cross-legged on the thick carpet in front of the fire. Her clothes were still damp, but she seemed much more comfortable now. She looked up at Marcus with those serious brown eyes. "Mom told me that there was a vampire king who lived in the castle on the mountain. She said his name was Marcus, and that he saved her life once when she was young. She said he was a good vampire, not like the mean ones in stories." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "When did she tell you these stories?" "She started telling them to me when I was little, maybe 4 years old. But she told me the most important parts just before she got sick. She made me promise to remember everything." "Where is your mother now, Emma?" The girl's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. "She died last month. Cancer. She was sick for a long time." Marcus closed his eyes, feeling a pain he hadn't experienced in decades. Sarah was gone, and he had never even known she was sick. If his memory wipe had truly worked, she shouldn't have remembered him at all. But, somehow, she had retained enough memory to tell her daughter stories. "Emma," he said gently, "why were you outside in the storm tonight?" "I live with my Aunt Linda now. She's not very nice to me. Tonight she was drinking again and got really angry. She said I was too much trouble and that she wished my mom had never left me with her. She pushed me outside and locked the door." Marcus felt anger building in his chest. Linda Richardson was Sarah's younger sister, and apparently not much of a guardian for a 7-year-old child. "She said I could come back when I learned to behave better," Emma continued. "But the storm started, and I got scared. I remembered Mom's stories about the castle, so I started climbing up the mountain to find you. I guess I got lost." Marcus looked at this brave little girl who had climbed halfway up a dangerous mountain in a hailstorm, following stories her mother had told her. Sarah's daughter had inherited her courage, it seemed. "You're safe now," Marcus told her. "We'll figure out what to do next." Emma smiled at him, and, for a moment, she looked exactly like her mother had 30 years ago. "Mom said you were the kindest person she ever met, even though you were a vampire. She said you saved her life and asked for nothing in return." Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out at the storm that was finally beginning to weaken. Behind him, he could hear Emma's steady breathing as exhaustion began to take hold. When he turned back, she had curled up on the carpet in front of the fire, using her thin jacket as a pillow. As he watched her sleep, Marcus made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. Sarah had trusted him once, long ago. Now her daughter needed protection, and he would not fail Sarah's memory by abandoning the child. Marcus carefully lifted Emma and carried her to one of the guest rooms. He tucked her into the large bed, making sure she was warm and comfortable. Tomorrow, he would have to decide what to do about Linda Richardson and Emma's living situation. But, tonight, the little girl was safe. As he closed the door to her room, Marcus thought about the strange turns life could take. For 800 years, he had ruled his vampire clan with cold efficiency, making decisions based on logic and survival. He had never expected that a small human child would walk back into his life, carrying stories and memories that should have been impossible. Outside, the last of the hail was falling, and the lightning was moving away across the valley. The storm was ending, but Marcus suspected that his quiet existence as the vampire monarch of Mount Ravencrest was just beginning to change in ways he couldn't yet imagine. He returned to his study and sat at his ancient desk, pulling out a leather-bound journal. For the first time in decades, he began to write about something other than clan business and territorial disputes. He wrote about Sarah, about the 3 weeks they had spent together, and about the daughter he had never known existed. The vampire monarch who had thought he had left his humanity behind centuries ago discovered that some connections transcend death, memory, and even the supernatural barriers between species. Emma Richardson was living proof that love and courage could survive even the most powerful magic. As dawn approached and Marcus felt the familiar pull of his daytime rest, he made plans for the evening to come. There would be decisions to make and problems to solve. But, for the first time in centuries, he was looking forward to tomorrow. Marcus woke at sunset the following evening to find his castle filled with an unfamiliar sound, laughter. For a moment, he lay in his ornate coffin, listening to the bright, musical sound echoing through the stone halls. It had been so long since he'd heard genuine joy within these walls that he almost didn't recognize it. He rose and, dressed in his usual black attire, then made his way through the castle following the sound. He found Emma in the kitchen, sitting at the large wooden table with Mrs. Catherine Wells, his human housekeeper. Catherine was a woman in her 60s who had served the castle for 20 years, one of the few humans who knew Marcus's true nature and wasn't afraid. "Good evening, Mr. Marcus," Catherine said with a warm smile. "I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of making Miss Emma some proper breakfast." The poor child was quite hungry. Emma looked up from a plate of scrambled eggs and toast, her face bright with happiness. She had been cleaned up and was wearing one of Catherine's old dresses, altered to fit her small frame. Her blonde hair was neatly brushed and tied back with a blue ribbon. "Marcus!" Emma exclaimed, jumping up from her chair to run to him. "Mrs. Catherine has been telling me stories about the castle." "Did you really save her from bandits 15 years ago?" Marcus caught Emma in a gentle hug, surprised by how natural the gesture felt. "Catherine tends to make my actions sound more heroic than they actually were." "Nonsense," Catherine said firmly. "You stopped those men from robbing and hurting innocent people. That sounds plenty heroic to me." As Emma returned to her breakfast, Marcus pulled Catherine aside. "Has anyone come looking for her?" Catherine's expression darkened. "Oh yes, that awful aunt of hers showed up around noon, demanding we return her property. I told her the child wasn't here, but she didn't believe me. She said she'd be back with the sheriff." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. "And what exactly did Linda Richardson say about Emma's disappearance?" "She claimed the girl ran away in the storm, but she didn't seem particularly worried about it. More annoyed than anything else. She kept talking about the burden of caring for a child and how Sarah should have made better arrangements." Marcus looked over at Emma, who was chatting happily with Catherine about the various rooms in the castle. The child showed no signs of wanting to return to her aunt's care, and Marcus couldn't blame her. "Catherine," Marcus said quietly, "I need you to do some research for me. Find out everything you can about Linda Richardson's financial situation, her drinking habits, and her fitness as a guardian. Be discreet." Catherine nodded knowingly. "I'll make some calls to friends in the village. People talk, and I have my sources." As the evening progressed, Marcus found himself drawn into conversations with Emma that surprised him. The 7-year-old was remarkably intelligent and mature for her age. She asked thoughtful questions about the castle, its history, and even about Marcus himself. "Mom told me that vampires live for hundreds of years," Emma said as they walked through the portrait gallery. "How old are you really?" "Very old," Marcus replied. "I was born in the year 1195. Emma's eyes widened as she did the math in her head. That's over 800 years. You've seen everything change. What was it like when there were knights and castles everywhere?" Marcus found himself telling her stories he hadn't shared with anyone in decades. Tales of medieval courts, ancient battles, and the early days of vampire society. Emma listened with rapt attention, asking intelligent questions that showed she was truly processing everything he told her. "Were you always a vampire king?" she asked as they sat in the library, surrounded by thousands of ancient books. "No," Marcus said thoughtfully. "I was turned into a vampire when I was 25 years old. I spent the first 100 years learning to control my new abilities and understanding vampire society. The leadership role came much later, after I had proven myself to the other clans." "Do you miss being human?" Marcus paused, considering the question. It wasn't something he'd thought about seriously in centuries. "Sometimes. But being a vampire has allowed me to protect people and maintain peace between our kind and humans. I've been able to do things that would have been impossible with a human lifespan." Emma nodded solemnly. "Mom said you use your power to help people, not hurt them. She said that makes you special." Before Marcus could respond, Catherine appeared in the library doorway. Her expression was grim. "Mr. Marcus," she said carefully, glancing at Emma. "Could I speak with you privately?" Marcus led Catherine to his study, leaving Emma absorbed in a book of fairy tales. Once they were alone, Catherine's composure cracked. "It's worse than we thought," she said. "Linda Richardson is deeply in debt and has been drinking heavily since her sister died. The neighbors report hearing Emma crying through the walls on multiple occasions. There have been several noise complaints about Linda's late-night parties." Marcus felt his hands clench into fists. "What about the authorities? Haven't they investigated?" "That's the problem. Linda works as a clerk in the county social services office. She has friends who look the other way, and she knows how to present herself as a grieving aunt doing her best with a difficult child." "And Emma's father?" Catherine shook her head. "Sarah never revealed who he was. No name on the birth certificate, and Linda claims Sarah never told her anything about him." Marcus walked to his window, looking out over the valley where lights were beginning to twinkle in the darkness. "What are our legal options?" "Very limited, I'm afraid. Linda is Emma's legal guardian, appointed by Sarah before she died. Even with evidence of neglect, it could take months or years to prove she's unfit. And there's no guarantee Emma would end up in a better situation." Marcus turned back to Catherine. "What if Linda were convinced to give up guardianship voluntarily?" Catherine raised an eyebrow. "And how would that happen?" "Leave that to me. But first, I need to know if Emma would be safe here. Could we arrange for proper tutoring? Medical care? Everything a growing child needs?" "Absolutely. I've been thinking the same thing. This castle needs young life in it, and Emma is a special child. She's not afraid of you or this place. If anything, she seems to belong here." As if summoned by their conversation, Emma appeared in the doorway of the study. "Marcus? Is everything okay? You look worried." Marcus knelt down to Emma's level. "Emma, I need to ask you something important. Are you happy staying here at the castle?" Emma's face lit up. "Oh yes. It's like living in one of Mom's fairy tales. And Mrs. Catherine makes the best food, and you tell the most amazing stories. I love it here. What if you could stay here permanently? What if this became your real home?" Emma's expression grew serious. "Would Aunt Linda let me do that? If she did, would you want to stay?" Without hesitation, Emma nodded. "Yes. This feels like where I belong. Mom always said I was special, and here I feel special in a good way." Marcus stood and made his decision. "Then, we'll make it happen." Later that evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Marcus prepared to make a visit to Linda Richardson. He dressed in his most intimidating attire, a long black coat, dark suit, and his family's ancient signet ring. When he wanted to, Marcus could project an aura that made even the bravest humans uncomfortable. He found Linda Richardson exactly where Catherine's sources had said she would be, at Murphy's Tavern, 3 drinks into her nightly routine. She was a thin woman in her 30s, with stringy brown hair and the pinched face of someone perpetually angry at the world. Marcus approached her table and sat down without invitation. "Ms. Richardson, we need to discuss Emma." Linda looked up, startled. Something in Marcus's presence made her instinctively lean back in her chair. "Who are you? How do you know about Emma?" "My name is Marcus Blackwood. I live in the castle on Mount Ravencrest. Your niece sought shelter there during last night's storm." Linda's expression shifted between relief and annoyance. "Well, bring her back. I don't have time to go chasing after runaway children." Marcus leaned forward slightly, allowing just a hint of his supernatural aura to show. "I don't think you understand the situation, Ms. Richardson. Emma didn't run away. She was forced out into a dangerous storm by your neglect." "Now wait just a minute, I'm not finished." Marcus's voice carried a subtle compulsion that made Linda fall silent. "I've done some research into your situation. You're facing eviction, you have several drunk and disorderly citations, and your neighbors report frequent disturbances from your residence." Linda's face paled. "You can't prove anything." "I don't need to prove anything. I'm here to offer you a solution." Marcus placed a manila envelope on the table. "Inside this envelope is a cashier's check for $50,000 and legal documents transferring Emma's guardianship to me." Linda stared at the envelope as if it might bite her. "50,000? You're serious?" "Completely serious. All you have to do is sign the papers and walk away. Emma will be well cared for, you'll have enough money to start fresh somewhere else, and we'll all pretend this conversation never happened." Linda reached for the envelope with shaking hands. "Why would you do this? What's your angle?" Marcus allowed his eyes to flash with just a hint of their supernatural glow. "Let's just say I have a vested interest in Emma's welfare. And, Ms. Richardson? If you ever come near that child again, or if you tell anyone about our arrangement, you'll discover that some of the old stories about what lives in that castle are more true than you might think." Linda paled further, suddenly, sobered by something she couldn't quite understand but instinctively feared. I need time to think about this." Marcus stood, leaving the envelope on the table. "You have until tomorrow night. If you haven't signed by then, I'll be forced to pursue other options. Options you wouldn't enjoy." As Marcus walked away, he heard Linda frantically opening the envelope. He knew she would sign. $50,000 was more money than Linda had ever seen, and her instincts were telling her not to cross the mysterious man who could afford such generosity. Marcus returned to his castle feeling optimistic for the first time in years. Emma was asleep in her room, safe and happy. Soon, she would be legally his responsibility, and he could ensure she grew up with all the love and protection Sarah would have wanted for her. As he prepared for his daytime rest, Marcus reflected on how much his existence had changed in just 2 days. The vampire monarch who had ruled alone for centuries was about to become something he'd never expected, a father to a remarkable little girl who carried her mother's courage and somehow knew exactly where she belonged. Outside, the stars shone brightly over Mount Ravencrest, as if the universe itself approved of the new family being formed within the ancient castle walls. 6 months after that stormy night, Castle Blackwood had transformed into something Marcus never thought possible, a true home. The ancient stone walls that had once echoed with the serious discussions of vampire politics now rang with Emma's laughter and the sound of her feet running through the corridors. Marcus stood in the renovated schoolroom, watching as Emma worked through her mathematics problems with Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the private tutor they had hired from the city. At 7 years old, Emma was already working at a 4th grade level in most subjects, her quick mind absorbing information with startling speed. "Mr. Blackwood," Dr. Harper said, approaching Marcus with Emma's completed work. "I must say, Emma continues to exceed all expectations. Her reading comprehension is particularly remarkable. She finished the entire Harry Potter series last week and has moved on to more advanced literature." Marcus smiled, an expression that had become natural over the past months. "Emma has always been exceptional. Her mother was equally intelligent." Emma looked up from her desk, where she was now working on a science project about local wildlife. "Marcus, can we go visit the village today? Mrs. Catherine needs supplies, and I want to see how Mr. Patterson's broken arm is healing." Dr. Harper looked surprised. "Mr. Patterson?" "One of the villagers," Marcus explained. "Emma has been helping me with some community outreach. She has a gift for talking to people. This was an understatement. In the months since Emma had come to live at the castle, she had somehow convinced Marcus to become more involved with the human community below. What had started as simple charitable donations had evolved into regular visits, medical assistance, and aid for families in need. Emma had a way of seeing problems that adults missed and suggesting solutions that seemed obvious once she pointed them out. When the village school needed new books, she had organized a fund drive. When elderly Mrs. Peterson needed help with her garden, Emma had recruited teenage volunteers. When young Tommy Chin was being bullied at school, Emma had talked to the bullies and somehow convinced them to become Tommy's protectors instead. Dr. Harper, Emma said, gathering her books, did you know that Marcus once helped build the original village church? He told me all about it last week. Dr. Harper looked at Marcus with new interest. Really? That church dates back to the 1800s. Marcus cleared his throat. My family has deep roots in this area. We've always supported the community. After Dr. Harper left, Emma bounded over to Marcus with her usual energy. Can we really go to the village? I promised Mrs. Anderson I'd help her with the flower arrangements for the harvest festival. Marcus knelt down to Emma's level, straightening her school uniform. Over the months, he had learned that Emma thrived on routine and responsibility. She had a schedule that included lessons, physical activities, creative time, and community service. She was possibly the most well-adjusted child he had ever encountered. Of course we can go. But, first, we need to discuss something important. Emma's expression grew serious. She had learned to recognize when Marcus had important news to share. What is it? Marcus led her to the comfortable sitting area by the fireplace, where they often had their most meaningful conversations. Emma, do you remember when you first came here, and I told you that there were things about me that were different? You mean because you're a vampire, Emma said matter-of-factly. I've always known that. Mom told me, and, besides, it's pretty obvious once you pay attention. Marcus was still amazed by how easily Emma accepted his nature. She had figured out his feeding schedule, understood why he couldn't go out during the day, and had even learned to recognize other supernatural beings they occasionally encountered. Yes, well, being different means that sometimes I have responsibilities that other people don't have. Tomorrow night, representatives from the vampire clans of Europe will be arriving for a gathering. It's something that happens every few years. Emma's eyes lit up with curiosity. Will I get to meet them? That's what we need to discuss. Some of these vampires are very old and set in their ways. They may not understand why I've chosen to raise a human child. There could be some tension. Emma tilted her head, considering this. Are you worried they'll try to hurt me? I would never let that happen, Marcus said firmly. But, I want you to understand that this meeting might be different from what we're used to. These vampires know me only as their leader, not as your guardian. They may try to test our relationship. Emma stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the mountains where she had first encountered Marcus. When she turned back, her expression was determined. Marcus, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you regret taking care of me? Do you wish your life was still like it used to be? Marcus felt his chest tighten. Emma, why would you ask that? Because sometimes I see how hard you work to make sure I'm safe and happy. And I know that before I came here, your life was probably much simpler. I don't want to be a burden. Marcus stood and walked over to Emma, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. Emma Richardson Blackwood, you listen to me very carefully. You are not a burden. You are the greatest gift I could have ever received. You've made my existence meaningful in ways I never thought possible. Emma's face broke into a smile. Emma Richardson Blackwood? If you want, Marcus said carefully. I've been working with lawyers to make the adoption official. You would legally be my daughter, with all the rights and protections that entails. But, only if that's what you want. Emma threw her arms around Marcus's waist, hugging him tightly. I want that more than anything. You're the best father I could have asked for. Marcus held her close, marveling at how completely the small human had changed his understanding of what family could mean. Then, it's settled. And, don't worry about the vampire gathering. Anyone who has a problem with our family will have to answer to me. The next evening, Castle Blackwood filled with ancient and powerful vampires from across Europe. Marcus had prepared extensively, ensuring that the meeting would go smoothly and that Emma would be kept safe. Catherine had arranged for extra security, and several trusted vampire allies had arrived early to provide support. Emma, meanwhile, had approached the situation with her usual direct curiosity. She had researched vampire etiquette, practiced formal greetings in several languages, and prepared thoughtful questions about European history and culture. The formal reception took place in the Great Hall, which had been decorated according to centuries-old traditions. As the vampire dignitaries arrived, Marcus introduced each one to Emma with careful protocol. Lord Victor Draculesti of Romania, Marcus announced as a tall, imposing vampire with silver hair approached. "May I present my daughter, Emma Richardson Blackwood?" Emma curtsied perfectly, just as Catherine had taught her. "Lord Victor, it's an honor to meet you. I've been reading about the history of your region. The architecture of your ancestral castles must be magnificent." Lord Victor looked surprised, then pleased. "Indeed, young lady. Few humans appreciate the artistry of our traditional building methods." As the evening progressed, Emma charmed vampire after vampire with her genuine interest in their stories and her respectful curiosity about their cultures. She asked intelligent questions about art, music, literature, and history, demonstrating a knowledge that impressed even the most ancient members of the gathering. However, not all the vampires were pleased with the situation. Lady Morgana Ashworth of England, a vampire known for her strict adherence to traditional vampire-human boundaries, finally voiced the concerns some of the others were thinking. "Marcus," she said during a quiet moment, "this is quite irregular. A vampire of your standing, raising a human child as your own? What happens when she grows up? When she begins asking questions about marriage, about having children of her own? How will you explain the limitations of your nature?" Before Marcus could respond, Emma appeared at his side. She had been listening from nearby, and her expression showed she had heard Lady Morgana's concerns. "Lady Ashworth," Emma said politely, "may I address your concerns?" Lady Morgana looked taken aback but nodded. "Please, child. You're worried about what happens when I grow up, about whether I'll be happy living in the supernatural world. But I think you're missing something important. Marcus isn't just raising me to be his daughter. He's teaching me to be a bridge between the human and vampire worlds." Emma stepped forward, her young voice carrying surprising authority. "I know what I am and what Marcus is. I know the limitations and the advantages of both. When I grow up, I'll be uniquely qualified to help both communities understand each other better. Isn't that more valuable than pretending we exist in separate worlds?" The gathered vampires exchanged glances. Lady Morgana studied Emma with new interest. "And what of your own desires?" Lady Morgana asked. "What if you wish to marry a human man? Have human children?" Emma smiled. "Then, Marcus will walk me down the aisle at my wedding and spoil his grandchildren terribly. Being part of a vampire family doesn't mean I can't also have a human life. It just means I'll have a better understanding of both worlds." Lord Victor laughed, a sound like distant thunder. "Marcus, your daughter has the makings of a diplomat. She may be more useful to our kind than any of us anticipated." As the formal meeting concluded and the vampires began departing for their various territories, several approached Marcus privately to express their support for his unconventional family. "You have done something remarkable," Lord Andreas of Germany told him. "That child will grow up to be a powerful ally to our people, not because she fears us, but because she loves us." After the last guest had departed, Marcus found Emma in the library, reading a book about European vampire legends that Lord Victor had given her as a gift. "How are you feeling?" Marcus asked, settling into the chair beside her. "Happy," Emma said simply. "I was worried they wouldn't understand, but most of them seem to think we're doing something good." Marcus smiled. "You impressed them all. You were brave and intelligent, and you represented our family beautifully." Emma looked up from her book. "Marcus, do you think Mom somehow knew this would happen?" that I would end up here with you? Marcus considered the question seriously. I think your mother was a very wise woman who understood that love and family come in many different forms. She made sure you knew about me so that you'd have somewhere to go if you needed protection. And, now you're exactly where you belong. You're Emma Richardson Blackwood, daughter of a vampire monarch and heir to a legacy that spans both worlds. You're going to do amazing things, Emma. Emma smiled and returned to her book, while Marcus reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them together. A year ago, he had been a solitary ruler, managing vampire politics and maintaining ancient traditions. Now he was a father, a protector, and a bridge between two worlds, all because a brave little girl had climbed a mountain in a hailstorm, following stories her mother had told her. Outside the castle windows, the stars shone down on Mount Ravencrest, witnessing the continuation of a story that began with love, grew through courage, and would continue through the unbreakable bond between a vampire king and his remarkable human daughter. As Emma grew up in the years that followed, she would indeed become the bridge she had spoken of to Lady Morgana. She would study both human and vampire cultures, mediate disputes, and eventually establish the first official council for human-vampire relations. But that was still years in the future. For now, she was simply a happy child who had found her true home with a father who would protect her, guide her, and love her unconditionally. And Marcus, the ancient vampire monarch, had discovered that sometimes the greatest power comes not from ruling over others, but from opening your heart to love. The castle that had once been a symbol of solitary power had become a beacon of hope, proving that family, love, and understanding could transcend even the most fundamental differences between species. Emma and Marcus had created something new in the world, a family built on choice, strengthened by adversity, and destined to change how humans and vampires understood each other forever. Their story had begun with a storm and a rescue, but it would continue for generations as a testament to the power of love to transform even the most unlikely circumstances into something beautiful and enduring.